Hey guys, what's going on? It's Ben here. I'm back again today doing another video. The subject of today's video is again going to be on Game of Thrones. I am still getting pretty pumped for the premiere of the final season. It's this coming Sunday if you are unaware, and I just want to do another video and address something that I would not normally do with Game of Thrones, but this is going to be a slight critique of one aspect of the show, particularly one character, Tyrion Lannister. So now let me explain. I think that Tyrion Lannister is one of the best characters on the show. I think his storyline from seasons 1 to 4 is fantastic. I think him in season 4 is arguably my favorite season for one character of the show. I think just what he goes through in season 4 is amazing. It's fantastic acting, it's good story writing. Just all of it is so well done. But then I've noticed, in my opinion, his writing and his storyline, season 5 to season 7, has been relatively weak for what we're used to for Game of Thrones, and I don't blame them in any way because honestly, after Tyrion gets, if you're unaware, at the end of season 4, instead of getting executed, Tyrion is snuck out of his cell by his brother, and then he goes on to kill his dad, Tywin Lannister, and his former lover Shay, and then he is basically shipped off on a boat or a ship to uh, Essos across the ocean, and he then goes on to team up with Daenerys Targaryen at the end of, or at the beginning of season 6. Season 5, he's basically just traveling around Essos with Jorah Mormont, who's captured him, and they're just like going around, not really doing anything. Um, he's being captive. Season 6, he teams up with Daenerys, he starts advising her, and then season 7, they go across the Narrow Sea back to Westeros, and he's still advising her. But I feel like for what we're used to this character, being so smart and being so politically savvy, his writing is just really regressed seasons 5 to 7. He doesn't make really any. His funny comments are still somewhat funny, but they're like, excuse the language, but a lot of his punchlines are like cock or just like saying the F word, and it's like I get that maybe he's desensitized because he had to kill his own father and his lover betrayed him and his life was kind of in shambles, but I think he'd still remain like a smart person, whereas all of his major comedy, he used to have these such comedic lines and really witty, intelligent lines in seasons 1 to 4. Seasons 5 to 7, it's been a lot of like every punchline of every joke with him is basically just the F word or cock, and then basically like his political savvy has gone away in that yes he is promoted to Hand of the King based on for Daenerys based on formerly being the Hand of the King to Joffrey, but like his idea to get the White Walker and present it to Cersei, it's a really half-baked, poorly thought out plan, and to have him being the one present it, I get that he's not like a military mind and that he wouldn't really understand what would all go into an operation of going and getting one and fighting the White Walkers, but it just overall is a dumb way to prove it to her. When he says, "We'll bring the dead to her," I just think that that's such a bad plan, and he would know better than to do that because he knows that his sister isn't going to partner with them no matter what, because she doesn't care about anything but herself, really. Um, that being said, I just don't like I still really love the character, but I don't like what they've done with him. I feel like they don't know what to do with him anymore because essentially you could say season 4 he's the main character of the show. If you had to pin it on one character, and even a lot of seasons 2 and 3, he is really like the main character or at least tied for the main character. But I feel like season 4 he's definitely the lead because much of the plot is surrounding his trial. But then seasons 5, 6 and 7, it's the stories kind of move past him, but yet he's still alive, so they don't really know what to do with him. So he's kind of just become a background character who we all still like, but he's that's all he is a background character now because he's not really relevant in that like if Tyrion died right now, the show, besides us all being kind of sad, the actual plot of the show wouldn't really be affected whatsoever. Likely Varys or Jorah would just step in as Hand of the King and things would go business as usual, honestly. So that being said, I want to get into three alternate plots that I think would have been much better for Tyrion's character and would have made him still relevant on the show possibly. So just to clarify, his current plot line is he escapes King's Landing, he the narrow goes over the narrow sea to Essos and eventually becomes Daenerys' Hand of the King. So I'm going to present three alternates. Number one is I think it's the most simple, and I think it's maybe the least rewarding, but I think in a way it could be super rewarding too, just depending on how you look at it, and that is Tyrion gets executed at the end of season 4. Now, how I would write this is that Tyrion still gets out and still kills Shay and still goes to the privy to kill his dad and still does kill his dad. But I think that what should have happened is that on his way out, he should have somehow ran into some guards. They would have detained him, realized that he killed Tywin, and then he would have again still been executed. Now, while I feel like it would be sad to see one of the best characters on the show, one of our favorite characters die, I feel like it would prevent us from getting this, okay, it's not bad, but it's just not great. It's just average plot that Tyrion's been living out the past couple of seasons. And it would probably be in my opinion, arguably the most emotional death on the show, and that Tyrion's really been one of the main heartbeats of the show. So for him to be killed would be just so dramatic, and considering it would be basically his own family doing it to him for a crime he didn't do, it would be like Ned Stark, but I think even a little amplified in that we would feel a lot worse because we've had so much more time with Tyrion. And I just feel like it would allow the character to in a way go out on top, in that he would have gotten his justice, and that he would have killed Shay, he would have killed Tywin, those who have been betraying him, or in Tywin's case, keeping him down his whole life. He would have got that payback, but basically he would have ended where his story kind of naturally started to end, which would be the end of season 4. And I think honestly, if you look at the show and what would have really changed, not that much. Varys still likely somehow ends up in Essos. He takes a ship or something like that, and he shows Daenerys that he's had some connections to her, and then basically we probably just see either Varys, or when Jorah comes back and fights off people for her, one of those two is her Hand of the King. She still goes over to Westeros like she does, and nothing really changes with the story except we don't have Tyrion going around saying cock and getting drunk all the time, which is really all he's been the last 3 seasons, sadly. Okay, so that's scenario 1. Scenario 2 is this one is a little bit weirder, or maybe less expected, but uh, I think what would have been good is for him to still kill Tywin, kill Shay, go over to Essos, and for them to in season 5, instead of having Jorah capture him and basically have Tyrion just be a random hostage all season, I would have loved for Varys and Tyrion right away to, in season 5, have gone on the young Griff plotline. If you're not familiar, they cut it out of the TV show for time because they didn't have enough time to cover it. But in the books, there's a plot line where supposedly Daenerys' younger brother, who everyone assumed was murdered as a baby, he was supposedly smuggled out of King's Landing by Varys, sent over to Essos, and raised up to be kind of like the next coming and the guy who's going to reclaim the throne, more so than even Daenerys. And I would have loved, and so in the books, actually, Varys is backing up this young Griff character and not Daenerys. So he's kind of like in opposition to Daenerys. And eventually, towards the end of the series, young Griff comes over to Westeros like um, Daenerys does, and he kind of launches an attack. And I think ultimately the character probably ends in defeat, because I don't think that's necessarily been written yet, but I think we're supposed to assume that, because if they were willing to cut him out of the show completely, the television show, that probably means that his plot didn't amount to that much, like in the grand scheme of things in the finale. So I think it would have been cooler though to see him, Tyrion and Varys back young Griff in season 5, and then maybe sort of have like a squabble between him and Daenerys, and then have probably at the end of season 5 like Daenerys defeat young Griff, but then maybe somehow like Tyrion comes over to her side, or even have it bleed over into season 6. Have it be like season 5, he kind of gets acclimated and meets young Griff, and they kind of start strategizing. Then maybe like mid season 6, they attack Daenerys and try and like take her army or something like that, because he as being a male more has a claim to the throne, being a male Targaryen than Daenerys does as a female Targaryen. So it would be interesting to see that play out and like Tyrion be his hand of the king, but then maybe something happens where Daenerys ultimately defeats young Griff over in Essos, absorbs his army, and then either at that point you could kill off Tyrion, or you could have him join Daenerys and be her hand of the king. I just feel like that would have been a much more interesting plot line than basically having him just being a drunken stupor in season 5 and being a captive of Jorah Mormont, because that plot just did nothing for me, honestly. Um, but it would have been pretty interesting, I think. And I think that it would have made Varys a much more interesting character, and that his allegiances would have been very questionable in certain ways, because if he would have then had to flip over to Daenerys too, you would be like, well, who is Varys really backing here, sort of thing. I think it would have been much better for both characters' plotline, and I think you could have something where, as I say, you could have Tyrion get killed off in like a battle, or Daenerys captures young Griff's like advisory committee and she kills them all off, or she realizes that Tyrion has connections to the throne. She uses him as a hostage to kind of bargain with uh, like Tommen Baratheon, or you could just have him somehow weasel his way into becoming one of her advisors or hand of the king, and have that plotline basically go where it was from like the mid season 6 onward with the regular story plotline. Okay, and the last option I have here is the option of Tyrion, like Tywin said right before Tyrion killed him, I was never gonna let them execute you. I was still gonna just send you to the wall. I have the last one being that Tyrion actually does get sent to the wall, and he basically, we could either have him like spend all of season 5 traveling there, or he gets there relatively early in season 5, and basically we get to see him and Jon reunite and get to see them play off of each other a lot, just because they honestly had a decent dynamic even early in the show, and they just shared, I think it was 1 or 2 scenes in season 1, but they still had a pretty good interplay between the two actors and the two characters. So you could have seen them reunite, and then I think his plotline would have been interesting in that I think probably towards the end, or at the beginning of season 6, when Jon quits the Night's Watch, we would have probably seen Tyrion then become Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, and he would have been the one protecting them from the Night King. He ultimately probably would have died when the Night King came over the wall then, but it still would have given him more to do than I feel like he did in this current plot, because you would have seen him maybe be involved in Hardhome in some way. Um, he would have he would have probably like been restrained, or like they'd have to like tie him up or something when they were all gonna kill Jon Snow at the end of season 5, which would have been interesting. And then who knows what really would have happened, but maybe Jon Snow, as I say, Jon Snow comes back, he executes Alistair, Thorne, and Ollie, he leaves, says my watch is ended, and then we probably see Tyrion either become Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, or maybe even leave with Jon Snow and Davos and become Hand of the King of Jon Snow instead of Davos. And then Davos kind of takes on, or just an advisory role. But that would have been an interesting plot line too, to see him kind of in the north. We could have seen him and Sansa reunite in Winterfell after the Battle of the Bastards, or even before the Battle of the Bastards, like Jon and Sansa reunite, because they are technically still husband and wife, Sansa and Tyrion. So it would have been interesting. And then technically Tyrion, if he is still married to Sansa, and Sansa is the only non-bastard Stark who is the eldest in the north, Tyrion would almost, in a sense, technically be the Warden of the North after they do the Battle of the Bastards, because he would be the husband of the eldest Stark. And I think all the boys were basically dead. Bran was still alive, but no one really knew it, so that he was assumed dead. So Sansa was the eldest Stark still living, and Tyrion was married to her. So after the Battle of the Bastards, if Tyrion is with Jon Snow and them at that point, Tyrion is Warden of the North, which would be a really interesting plot line. We could see some negotiation maybe between him and Jon, that Jon actually should be King of the North, which I think he would probably allow to happen because he would respect Jon Snow enough. But it just would have been a really interesting plot line. There you go, guys. Those are my 3 alternate plots for Tyrion that would have greatly improved his storyline, in my opinion. I don't hate his plotline over how it happened during the regular show. I just think they could have done so much more with it, and I think that basically his character has really just been sitting around, and the writers haven't really known what to do with him, because all he does from seasons 5 to 7 is get drunk, come up with bad ideas. Where I feel like the writers have just dumbed him down to serve purposes of the plot, like to get the White Walkers. And then I also feel like, just in general, he isn't as funny anymore, and all his punchlines are really crass and not as witty as they used to be for what was basically the smartest, or in the realm of the smartest characters on the show. So to recap, my 3 plot lines for him are getting executed at the end of season 4 after killing Tywin, going over to Essos and introducing the young Griff storyline in season 5 with him and Varys backing him. Ultimately, young Griff probably gets defeated and Tyrion joins Daenerys, who gets executed. Or the third alternate, which would be Tyrion goes north, gets banished to be on the Night's Watch, witnesses Hardhome. When Jon Snow gets executed, he either becomes Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, and we still get to see what's going on the Wall, or when Jon Snow quits the Night's Watch, Tyrion follows him and goes down with them to the Battle of the Bastards, and basically we see Tyrion potentially become Warden of the North, even depending on his marriage to Sansa and how that's viewed, or he just bends the knee to Jon Snow, and we see him get to be Hand of the King to Jon Snow. All 3 of those have been much more interesting in my opinion. That's just me. Leave comments below if you agree or disagree, or just tell me what you think. Hope you have a good day. Bye.